Fulton County, Georgia, bracing for even more national attention as Donald Trump and his 18 co-defendants are expected to surrender at the Rice Street Jail no later than Friday of this week. Georgians who served on the grand jury that delivered Trump's fourth indictment are already feeling the negative impact of that national attention. NBC News has learned that Trump supporters posted the purported names and addresses of grand jury members on a fringe website that often features violent rhetoric. And the escalating tensions over the Georgia case may not be stopping anytime soon, as the court proceedings are set to be Trump's most public yet. Joining me now, Georgia Congresswoman Nikema Williams. Congresswoman, it's an honor to have you on the show. I'd like to start with the following question. Donald Trump finally facing accountability for his election subversion efforts in Georgia, but also for the harassment and intimidation of election workers like Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss. What was your reaction to the sweeping indictment from Fani Willis?
So, Katie, first, thank you for covering the important details of the people that were actually impacted by this every day. Georgians turn out to vote for the first time in 28 years for a Democratic president, and we delivered our electoral college votes. And then to have someone, a current sitting president, come and try to strip the will of the people, I think it is fitting that is happening in the district that we call the Fighting Fifth, that where accountability will be brought to Donald Trump and his 18 lackeys who are co-conspirators in the indictment. But when you think about Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss and what they had to endure, a sitting president put a target on their backs, and they had to leave their homes and get security. And then when they thought someone was coming to help them, it was someone that Trump and his lackeys sent to harass them, intimidate them, and put even more fear in their lives. So what we know in Fulton County is that no one is above the law. My district attorney, Fani Willis, will hold Donald Trump and anyone else who breaks the law in Fulton County accountable. And so we're going to allow this process to play out. At some point this week, he will be down in Fulton County in the Fighting Fifth so that he can present himself to our Sheriff Patrick Labatt, and there will be a mugshot, and Donald Trump will go through the process like everyone else who is charged with a crime in Fulton County.
And you know, the state of Georgia politics, it's always fascinating, right? You got Governor Brian Kemp publicly pushing back on Donald Trump, even right after that indictment comes out. Former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, I was there in Fulton County last week, testified for hours before that grand jury, calling Trump, quote, one of the biggest mistakes this country has ever made. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger famously rebuffing Trump's efforts for him to, quote, find those votes. I mean, these are all Republican officials. So what do you make of that rift in the Republican Party in terms of politics in Georgia from that cult of Trump?
Well, what we also know, Katie, is that Governor Brian Kemp, he might be saying this or that about what he wants the Republican Party to talk about, but this is political for him. He's not standing on the side of democracy. He's not standing on the side of making sure that everyone who wanted to cast a legal ballot is able to do so, because let's not forget, Brian Kemp is the same Republican governor who signed SB 202 into law that we're currently litigating throughout this entire process. So he is still of the party of Donald Trump. He has not condemned his party. What he's doing is trying to find a way to remain relevant so that he can win elections. But this shouldn't be about elections. This should be about what is fair, just, and right. We should all be standing on the side of a free and fair election process, not just when it benefits one party or another. And Brian Kemp is still the party of Trump, and he's still going along with all of the other things that Trump is supporting. Let's not forget all of the things that he did to lead up to this. And so what we know is that the 2024 election is right around the corner. Democrats are going to continue to show the country and Georgians how we deliver every day for them, because Brian Kemp, Donald Trump, and the Republican Party just doesn't stand up for everyday Georgians.
So let's talk about efforts to maintain voter integrity and to protect the ability for people to exercise that right. You recently reintroduced the Preventing Election Subversion Act, which would institute new safeguards to protect state election officials from partisan pressure and to empower nonpartisan local election officials. This legislation may have an uphill battle in Congress, but especially considering the legal landscape right now, why is it so important for this bill to pass?
So, I mean, if anyone listened to the story when Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman testified on January 6th, what they did was they showed up to work a job that everyday citizens show up to do, to be a part of our democracy. And they should have never been subjected to the things that they were subjected to. But we have to make sure that we're, number one, keeping election workers safe. Number two, giving our local jurisdictions, our county boards of elections, every tool in their toolbook to make sure that everyone has access to the ballot. And we shouldn't allow one person or one party to come in and overturn the will of the voters. So this Election Subversion Act that is being reintroduced, it might have an uphill battle now, Katie, but what I do know is that we are going to have another election cycle in 2024. And when we're in the majority, under the leadership of Speaker Hakeem Jeffries, we will get voting rights legislation passed, including the Gentlemen's Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Election Subversion Act, so that we can make sure that no matter where you live in this country, no matter your zip code or your bank account, everyone has the same access to the ballot.
Congresswoman, I've got less than a minute, but I did want to ask something about the following. You know, Donald Trump very publicly has a pattern of harassment, intimidation of women, and especially women of color. And yet it looks like it's the women, and the women of color especially, that are standing up and saying no. LaTosha Brown in my last hour is saying these are defenders of democracy. What is your message to people that want to break the law, regardless of whether or not that they were the former president of the United States?
In Fulton County, under the leadership of District Attorney Fani Willis, a Black woman, might I add, everyone is held accountable and no one is above the law, not even former failed presidents. So I am looking forward to Donald John Trump having his day in court so that the voters in Fulton County can hold him accountable.
Congresswoman Nikema Williams, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Katie.